Okay, so if I go and make the aluminium strips today, then I can finish the legs by tomorrow, but then I need to replace the painting of the rooftop for next weekend, but then if I do that, I cannot do the DJ, I cannot finish the DJs to these strips to next Friday, I guess? Oh, sorry about that, Muna, it's just been really hectic in here. Although the divide and conquer strategy has not really been so successful, and thus also the reason why we haven't been able to finish a video. All of the projects are never done enough to be able to make into a video. So, better get back to it? Thanks, Muna. I really needed that. So, since we are the furthest with the limbs of the Octobot, shall we continue on the cosplay first? So, let's start with the arms and then move down to the legs. Since in the very first episode of this series, we had already made the arms and the rest of the Octobot. This then only leaves us with the elbow joints and the upper arms. So, for the joints, we actually need to make these flexible. And that is still the case. But since we want to suggest that the left arm can just start moving at any moment, I still need to make it as such, but then I can just glue it all in place once we get all of the painting done. Oh, yeah, I probably need to explain that first. For the arms, we need to make a ball joint. But I can't just use a styrofoam ball, as much as I would just like to do that, because it would have just ground away after the first hour of the first con. So I've made this wooden frame that can take all of the wear and tear from moving the arms within the joint, and this frame we will then fill with styrofoam ball that I had cut into 4 equal pieces, and then we use some hot glue to hold the pieces in place while the wood glue that is actually going to solidify the pieces to the wood is drying and can thus be held in place. After we got both of the spheres then, it was time for the socket. This would then be glued to the rest of the upper arm, so it can be incorporated into the design of this huge trunk-headed cone, to which we can then glue this wooden circle that will be the actual socket for the ball. Sadly, we do not have the luxury of actually making an entire real socket for the ball joint, but the weight of the hands that will be attached to the final ball will make it so it won't just fall out. And to finish up the socket, I've already added 10 lines dividing the ring to glue each of these decorative pieces to once we've marked each's center. Lastly, for the arm, we've got the actual upper arm. I could luckily use Perpacura for my 3D models to be able to get the pattern to be able to cut it out from some foam board. Although EVA foam would have probably been better for a more rounded shape, especially if I could have used some 10mm EVA foam. But the foam board will be tough enough to be able to give some extra strength to the build, and it's also a lot cheaper. And after having already used up more than 200 glue sticks on this project alone, I think you can guess that this isn't the cheapest thing around. But for now, we have to cut out each of these spikes before we can actually start to prep the piece for gluing by folding the foam board. Luckily, we could use the way each of the seams ends and connects to the next one as a line to be able to see at which angle I need to bench each of the spikes. After this, it was just a matter of adding hot glue to each of the seams and then pressing the two ends together, and lastly holding them in place with some masking tape. This way we could slowly but steadily circle around each of the two halves of the upper arm. After that, we grab another wooden ring, but this one way bigger to glue the joint halves of the upper arm onto. Adding a bead of glue to both the front and the back of the piece to get a good reference point before I slowly start to work my way around to join the two pieces together. After that, we get to do one more check for some weaker seams around the piece. After which we can start to remove some of the protruding joints. And add a 45-degree angle to this new top seam. Same as we did on this huge forward circle. This will then be used to finalize the upper arm as the piece that will sit on the other end of the shape to hold it in place and to help it hold its cylindrical form. So with some more masking tape pieces prepped on the other side of the table, we can do one more round of gluing around the top to finish up the upper arm. Since that will be best saved for after the painting. Otherwise we would need to add a ridiculous amount of masking tape to make sure that the paints don't blend. And as the last piece for the arms, we have this huge 3D printed ball bearing. For this I had designed a pattern that I can then split into 6 individual pieces for each ring, which will then be filled with these 21mm marbles that would function like the little spheres within a usual ball bearing. This will then allow the right arm to rotate up and down.
Hey! Give me one bye!
And so we go back to Peppercura, but this time we actually make the pattern pieces for the legs. So, as with most things, we do need a sturdy base, especially for this since it will hold the weight of the full cosplay. So we start with 2 MDF plateaus. In between I had to glue 5 of these cardboard pipes. Again, we use some hot glue to hold the pieces in place, while the actual wood glue that is going to hold the pieces sets up for a strong connection. After we had the frame of the feet done, we could then close these off with a trim of foam board around the circle and the heel.
Woody!
Well, it doesn't have to take long.
Hooray!
I've learned a little editing trick over the years. Ta-da!
Hello!
Sorry, but I'll have to keep that to myself. Although now that we've all these pieces cut, they still need to be glued. So let's see if I can use that trick again. Ta-da! Oh man, I really hope that will work.
Sure!
Yeah, so we will have to do another round with lots of 45-degree angles on the glued edges before we start to apply even more hot glue to this project. From the shin braces to the toes for the shoes, even these elaborate kneecaps.
Me!
Or these hinges for the toes of the Octobot.
Oh, Bonjour!
But then we get to make the ankle pieces. We're first assembling the sides and then gluing them onto a front piece. We get this strong base. This can then afterwards be glued to the MDF feet. We can then cut a slit from the front to allow us to actually insert a shoe for the feet that will allow me to actually wear the piece. So after a few screws through the sole of the shoe, we get to attach the hinges to the fronts of the feet. This in turn allows us to add some of the wooden guides to the toes that will be inserted into these slots to make sure that I can still remove the front toes to actually allow access to the shoes. Otherwise, I couldn't even tie the laces. Continuing, we can finally start to build up the rest of the legs. But first we need to make the base for the knee joints. So we glue another cylinder together. That we then attach around the shoe. And with a little extra hot glue as an ugly weld seam to fill the gaps, since Octavio will probably not be as great as a welder as he is behind the turntables, we got our first part of this joint done. Next up are the shins, making these 50 cm tall boxes, to which we then add some 20 cm wide fronts and backs, with these 150 mm wide circles cut away from both ends to make for the receiver for some of the joints. And so, after some final trimming, we get the second part of the legs. But it was at this point that we might have already started to run out of foam board again. Like heck, I think I've used more than 100 sheets of foam board in this project. Even despite all of that, we still have to muster on. So we can assemble things like the two versions of the toes. One for the back hinge with a thicker frame around it. And a smaller one that would just be a single layer for the front. And included with these final pieces are also a new cylinder for the top of the shins. That will also be our knee joints. And so with this glued on and the holes cut on both ends, we can also add a hole to the top of the ankle joint. And this will then finally allow us to add the aluminium frame to the insides of the pieces of the legs. But first, marking out the correct placement for each of the aluminium pieces, I can then start to add a crap ton of contact cement to the parts, and then press them in place to split the amount of glue between the two surfaces. Then I could let this dry, after which we can then permanently attach the two. But for the start and the end of the frame, I actually need some special attachments to be able to screw the aluminium to the rest of the Octobot. So for this I had already 3D printed some special pieces. But as soon as I finished the cleanup, I saw how freaking fragile these things were. But since I did not want to wait for another set to finish printing, and I wanted to get a little bit more experience with mold making, I wanted to see if I could cast them as a pair in silicone. Thus I started on a Lego mold box. To which we can then add a hard silicone for a one-piece mold, After that has dried, we can remove the Lego walls and also immediately clean up these Lego pieces as much as possible, because despite everything, the silicone still seeps through the seams. And after which we can then also remove the 3 printed bases. Finally, I could then start to remove some casted versions from some polyurethane from the molds. And then we can immediately use these for the bases of the legs, making for a aluminium and polyurethane combo to be the brace for the rotation point for the ankle joint. Then all that's left to do is to modify the thighs, so that they will allow the aluminium frame to pass through. And with that, we've got both the arms and the legs completed as much as possible before painting.
Whee!
Yeah, we actually did it. Hey Creagears, Robert here, and we hope you liked this latest episode. Still, we wanted to apologize for the lack of videos this last month. We've been trying to do so much at once at the workshop, between these limbs, the body, which we've just constantly been working on, the like 9 amiibo projects and commissions that we've got laying around, and we've been trying way too hard to do all of that at once. Well, it would have been way better to just finish one thing and then continue on to the next one. And all of this combined with the already slower months that we always have at the start of the year with the channel, it was really not working out that well. Again, sorry for that, but we've seen the error of our ways and we will try to keep it in check from now on. So you guys better subscribe so you can see the next episode, The Body, coming very soon on the 16th of April. So, we hope to see you guys then. And as always, keep those creative gears turning, and we will see you guys in the next episode.